Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had a secret world few knew about. Behind the glamour and the guitar riffs, Elvis had a group of men who were more than just friends. They were his shadow men. These men were not just buddies, they were the unsung heroes who managed the chaos that came with being Elvis. It's hard to believe, but Elvis didn't really like Hollywood. He found the glitz and glamour fake, preferring the simple life of his roots. But being with his entourage in LA was another story. They were like a family to him, even if it was a complicated family. These men were mostly from the South, just like Elvis. They felt safe and familiar in Hollywood with him. One man, Marty Lacker, said Elvis didn't like the phoniness of Hollywood. Yet being with these guys meant he could enjoy things he usually avoided, like parties and meeting beautiful women. These men were not just along for the ride, they had important jobs. They ran errands, took care of Elvis's cars, and made sure his homes were well stocked. At first, these guys didn't get paid. Elvis just covered their living costs. This was tough for them as it took up most of their time and left little room to earn extra money, but things changed. In the late 1950s, Elvis started paying them and formalizing their roles. However, this new arrangement brought its own problems. Being part of Elvis's inner circle wasn't easy. It made these men dependent on him, and they often acted like sycophants to gain his favor. This led to jealousy and gossip. Some, like Joe Esposito, became targets of resentment. He was the group's foreman, always counting expenses and trying to create a special group around Elvis. This made many of the others jealous and led to fights. Lamar Fike, often the butt of jokes, took the teasing in stride most of the time. But when it was too much, he felt hurt and started to hate those who teased him. The situation only got worse as Elvis's drug use increased in the mid-1960s. Elvis became more unpredictable, firing members for small mistakes and then bringing them back with gifts. This created a tense environment where everyone walked on eggshells. Elvis's behavior was not just affecting the group, but also his relationships with his family and staff. His father, Vernon, was especially worried. As the manager of Elvis's finances, Vernon was overwhelmed by the costs of maintaining Elvis's growing lifestyle. He was not cut out for this job, and his fear of outsiders made his anxiety worse. He saw the entourage as a drain on the family finances, a feeling that only grew stronger as Elvis's spending increased. By 1966, things took a drastic turn. Elvis's love for horseback riding led him to buy a massive ranch in Mississippi. He envisioned a perfect, secluded life there with his inner circle. But this new venture only added to Vernon's worries. With Elvis's movie and music careers slowing down, Vernon feared they were heading toward financial ruin. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, shared Vernon's concerns but had a different view. Parker liked to live luxuriously and was initially tolerant of Elvis's spending. He saw it as a reward for Elvis's success. However, by 1964, Parker grew worried about Elvis's changing behavior and declining work ethic. To understand what was happening, Parker started using some of Elvis's entourage to gather information. Elvis's appearance was another cause for concern. Since leaving the army, he had gained weight, which worried Wallis, his wife, and producers. Despite crash diets, Elvis couldn't stick to them and would always go back to his old eating habits. This change in Elvis was puzzling to Parker, who had always expected Elvis to maintain his professionalism. Adding to the troubles was Elvis's newfound religious fervor in 1964, which Parker saw as a distraction. Elvis's focus shifted, and his attention to work declined further. The combination of his health issues, changing behavior, and new religious interests left Elvis's team worried and unsure of how to help their king return to his former self. This complex web of relationships and responsibilities surrounding Elvis Presley was a secret world few knew about. It was a world of loyalty, jealousy, and constant stress, all wrapped around the charismatic figure of the king himself. Elvis Presley's life took an unexpected turn when he met Larry Geller, a Hollywood hairdresser with a passion for New Age spirituality. During their first meeting, Elvis was curious and asked Geller about his interests. Geller opened up about New Age ideas and shared several books with Elvis. The king was captivated, spending hours discussing these concepts with Geller. Geller encouraged Elvis to explore spirituality further, even suggesting a visit to a New Age retreat in Pacific Palisades. Elvis found solace in these new ideas, especially after a period of personal turmoil. He quit his job at the salon and began spending more time with Geller, who joined Elvis's entourage. Geller introduced Elvis to various spiritual texts and even convinced him to visit the Self-Realization Fellowship, a spiritual retreat. Elvis met the retreat's guru, Sri Daya Mata, and was deeply moved by their conversation. Inspired, he built a meditation garden at his home, Graceland. However, Elvis's new spiritual journey caused friction within his inner circle. His daily life in Los Angeles changed dramatically, and his entourage resented Geller's influence. Elvis, now more focused on spirituality, canceled social events and stopped encouraging his friends to read the same books. This led to resentment, and Elvis grew distant from the group, drawing closer to Geller instead. Colonel Parker, Elvis's manager, was worried about Geller's impact on Elvis's career. He saw Geller as a manipulator who was pulling Elvis away from his work. Parker, along with Elvis's father Vernon and the rest of the team, had little control over the situation. They needed a solution to steer Elvis back on track. Enter Priscilla, a young woman Elvis had met in Germany. Priscilla was smitten with Elvis and eventually moved to Memphis to be with him. Her presence brought a sense of normalcy and stability to Elvis's life. Unlike other women in his life, Priscilla was devoted to him and willing to put her own dreams on hold. Priscilla's influence helped Elvis establish a more private life at Graceland. However, her growing presence also caused tension among Elvis's friends and team members. She favored certain members of the entourage and, with Colonel Parker's encouragement, pushed for Elvis to propose to her. After much pressure, Elvis agreed, and they got engaged in December 1966. The relationship between Elvis and his team, now including Priscilla, was complex. While some, like Parker, saw her as a positive force, others resented her influence. Yet they all shared a common concern: Larry Geller's growing power over Elvis. As Elvis's spiritual journey continued to captivate him, the team realized they had to find a way to address Geller's influence and steer Elvis back to his career and responsibilities. As time went on, Elvis found himself caught between his spiritual quest and his relationships. Priscilla tried hard to understand his new interests, reading the spiritual books he brought home and listening to his talks about life's deeper meanings. But Elvis' focus on spirituality, especially after he started avoiding sex and other pleasures, made Priscilla feel left out. She felt like she was losing him, not just to his new faith, but to a man who was increasingly distant and absorbed in his studies. Elvis' friends noticed the change too. They saw how Elvis became less energetic, less himself. When Priscilla tried to involve him in fun activities like buying him a slot car set or encouraging his love for horses, he didn't seem interested. This made her feel sad and frustrated. She thought maybe if she could find other ways to connect with him, like getting him into different hobbies, she could bring him back, but it wasn't easy. Elvis felt a growing sense of duty to his spiritual journey, which made him pull away from his friends and Priscilla. A big change came in March 1967. Elvis had been taking lots of sleeping pills to cope with stress and had fallen and hit his head while filming in Los Angeles. This accident, combined with his already heavy schedule, made him even more out of touch. He couldn't keep up with the filming, and his manager, Colonel Parker, was getting impatient. Parker had already dealt with Elvis' frequent absences due to his spiritual retreats. Now, with Elvis' health and responsibilities slipping, Parker had had enough. In a private meeting, Parker spoke firmly with Elvis. He told him to stop reading spiritual books and cut back on time with Geller. Parker announced big changes, including limiting Elvis' interactions with Geller. This was a huge blow to Elvis, who felt he was being controlled. He was embarrassed and quiet as Parker spoke, but the message was clear: change or face the consequences. Following Parker's ultimatum, Elvis had to adjust. He resumed work on his film, Clambake, and eventually married Priscilla in a secret ceremony in Las Vegas on May 1, 1967. Parker organized everything to keep it a secret, inviting only a few close friends. This wedding marked a new chapter, but it didn't bring the peace Elvis hoped for. Priscilla was thrilled to be Mrs. Presley, but the joy was short-lived. The reality of Elvis' new life soon hit her. Parker's strict rules and Elvis' preoccupation with his spiritual studies caused tension. Elvis did seem to settle down a bit when Priscilla became pregnant, but even this joy was tinged with disappointment for Priscilla, who had hoped for more freedom and a slower pace of life. In August 1965, while Elvis was still deeply involved with Geller, he met the Beatles. The Beatles were visiting Los Angeles and wanted to meet the star who had influenced them so much. Initially, Elvis seemed uninterested, but soon he picked up a guitar and started playing with them. This moment of shared music brought a brief sense of connection. However, when Lennon visited Elvis later, he noted Elvis' isolation and felt that his fame had changed him into someone less relatable. As the years went by, Elvis struggled to balance his spiritual pursuits with his career and personal life. His friendship with Geller became a point of contention, especially after Parker's intervention. Geller was effectively pushed out, and Elvis and Priscilla burned his books, symbolizing the end of that chapter. Despite this, Elvis' fascination with spirituality remained strong. It was a deep-seated yearning that had grown since his early days as a struggling performer. Even after his marriage and fatherhood, the pull of his spiritual quest didn't fade away. It was a constant presence, driving him in ways he couldn't fully explain. Elvis Presley's life was a mix of glamour and struggle, public adoration and personal turmoil. His journey from a young musician to a global superstar was marked by intense highs and lows. His relationships with Priscilla and his friends were tested by his spiritual quests and the pressures of fame. Though he found love and a family, the demands of his career and his inner spiritual battles left him feeling isolated at times. As he moved forward, the memory of those early days, the music, and the friends who had supported him remained, but they could not erase the changes that had taken place. Elvis' story is one of a man who tried to find his true self amidst the lights and shadows of stardom.